Hello, friends. Welcome back to another edition of the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. You are listening to episode 172. We're going to call this one, You Are Deathless, with author Nicole Kerr. Again, you're listening to episode 172, and we're going to call this one, You Are Deathless, with Nicole Kerr. Guys, welcome back to another edition of the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. I am your host, Jamal Javanji. It is a pleasure to be back here on the show with you. I have been looking forward to this conversation, introducing this conversation to you for some time now. And, this is a really, it's one of my favorite topics, actually. It's about near-death experiences and people who have experienced life beyond the body. And more specifically, people who have experienced clinical death. So I have a guest coming on the show to talk about that because, incredibly, she has experienced her own death. She was involved in a fatal car accident, which you'll hear about, and she was declared to be dead. And had died actually several times in the process. And obviously she survived and came back, but she had an experience post-death outside the body that really answered a lot of questions for her and had a profound transformative effect on her life. So I'll let her talk about her experience, but just a little bit about her, just so you know a little bit about her background. I want to share her biography with you today. And so this is just a little bit about Nicole. Nicole was actually, she's appeared on, numerous television channels. She's been on CNN, PBS, CBS, ABC, the Food Channel, and a host of other TV and radio shows to share her unique perspective on wellness, lifestyle, and nutrition. Actually, for the past 30 years, Nicole has worked in all sectors of society, including in government, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. She's worked in various nonprofits, American Cancer Society. She's worked for the military, United States Air Force medical operations. She's been in academia, University of Hawaii. She's worked in hospitals, healthcare institutions like at the Adventist Health Castle and Queens Medical Center. She's done private consultations and, lots of things. She's done so many things throughout her life. She's earned a place in front of international audiences ranging from corporate food producers to health and medical associations. But throughout her career, she has focused on supporting people from every walk of life to make realistic, meaningful, happy choices for lifelong health and well-being. When she was 19 years old, as I mentioned, she was actually a cadet at the United States Air Force Academy. And this is when she had her traumatic incident that resulted in her death and then her subsequent near-death experience, so which you'll hear more about. She is a tremendous human being, and I can't wait to introduce this conversation to you today. But before we get into that, just a couple of things. Death is something that all of us, every single one of us, are going to experience. I don't need to tell you that, that, but I think it's something we know intellectually, but we really don't really stop and become very conscious about. But the fact is, you will go through physical death. The body, and by that I mean you will leave this body. Every single one of us will. And not only that, every single person that you love and hold dear and know personally will also experience death. They will let go of the body, every single one of us. So this is a subject that's for everybody. And in our culture, in our society, we have shied away from this. We don't like to think about it for obvious reasons. But understanding the nature of death is not morbid. It's actually the key to living well. And I don't think we understand this as much as we need to. Understanding the nature of death is the key to living well. So it's not every day that we get an opportunity to talk to somebody that has actually went through physical death and have come back to talk about it, right? most people who die don't come back to talk about it. And that's why there's such mystery and anxiety and fear around it, because there's so many unknowns, right? But not for Nicole. She's been there and done that, as she likes to say, and she has experienced death, and she has actually written a book about it. She's the author of You Are Deathless. That's the title of her book, You Are Deathless. She'll talk a little more about that. But that's her message, and I wanted to bring her on the show so she could talk a little bit about that message with all of us. It's, incredibly, incredibly important. So, without further ado, let me introduce my conversation with Nicole. Thank you so much for being our guest on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for asking me. I really am honored and just have a lot of appreciation and gratitude that you would have me on your podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's so much. Where do we start? Your life is, you have lived a very unconventional life in many ways, a very significant life. You're doing incredible work, but let's try to, I always like to say, where do we start? Well, let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about, just for the listeners, where did you grow up? What was growing up like? What was life like for you as a child?
Okay. Well, I grew up in the South, Jackson, Mississippi, and back in the 60s and 70s. So it was back then, civil rights was a big issue. So I went to private school until the seventh grade. And then my parents decided to put us in public school. And so I went from being in an all white school to basically being in an all African-American school. So I was bused in. I was during that time of integration for whites to be integrated into the Black school. So it was kind of a different situation for me growing up, where I was hearing about discrimination and things like that, to all of a sudden now I'm in the minority in my school, So that was a good lesson for me to learn, but it was a hard lesson because I didn't have many friends. There weren't a lot of, I guess there wasn't a lot of opportunity to become friends with people from a different race, honestly. The churches I went to were all white. So there was definitely that segregation piece that I experienced at a really immersed level. I had my father was a Marine. He was one of the second graduates from the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. So there's 4 kids. And pretty much lived in, middle to upper class lifestyle. We didn't really need for anything. We were provided for, but raised definitely with the Bible Belt, surrounding us, around, cinching us at the waist, because my dad was Southern Baptist and my mother was Lutheran. So Sundays, when somebody asked me once, well, what was the hardest thing about, the religion? I said, it was just so much of it, because we had to go to the Lutheran church in the morning, the Baptist church in the evening, the Baptist church on Wednesday, so it was just a lot of church and a lot of a God, the concept of a God that was loving and protecting on one side and judgmental and punitive on the other. So it was very confusing, I think, for most of us growing up, that you had to follow these rules. And if you didn't, you were going to a place called hell, where there was fire and destruction, and you would be separate from the rest of your family. So a lot of fear is involved in it. And I think that was one of the hardest pieces too with my near-death experience, was there was no fear when I crossed over to the other side. And so that's part of my message that I'm trying to bring to people, is to not fear death. And then when I had my near-death experience, I was actually told by my angel, that is what you're going back to do. And I didn't want to come back. I loved it on the other side, Jamal, and I didn't want to come back. So, it's taken me almost 40 years to get this book out. Okay. But, that's kind of my childhood. I took ballet, I took piano, things like that. But once I got to the Air Force Academy, which was pretty much a novelty because women were only admitted. The first class graduated in 80 and my class was 86. So that was still a new concept to allow females into the military academies. And there was a lot of resentment by a lot of the military leaders and fellow cadets that women were allowed in and to train with them, and a lot of abuse and hazing, which unfortunately is still going on today, especially in the sexual realm of abuse. So I went there because I wanted to please my father.
Totally. Okay. So thank you. Sure. Wow.
That was a lot.
So I just want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So what I heard you say is you grew up in Mississippi, deep South, during the time where segregation was still is, but really at the forefront of the civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s. Grew up obviously in the Bible Belt, the South, steeped into evangelical Christianity in that sense. So you were in church pretty much every time church was open. Lutheran church, the Southern Baptist church, yeah. Sunday, Wednesday, and had just an overview of the message that God is love, but also God is judgment, God is punitive. Obviously, even the understanding of Jesus and all of these things were seen through the lens of punishment of sin and that kind of thing. So this created lots of fear. People were either in the club or out of the club, but depending on what you believed, right? If you believe the right things, you're in. If you don't believe the right things, you're out. So lots of fear. You went to you grew up normal, I would imagine, just like anybody else in your society, but then you ended up following the footsteps of maybe what your dad would want for your life. You went to the U.S. Naval Academy. Is that correct?
Air Force in Colorado Springs.
Air Force Academy. Okay. Yes. I actually have a friend that graduated from the Air Force Academy. So, which whole different world, I would imagine, very difficult. Not an easy place to, it's very, obviously some military, it's challenging in that regard. So then you dropped a bomb on us when you mentioned that you had a near-death experience. Okay. So I guess this happened when you were 19. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about what your life was like just before, at 19, just before this event, and then what happened?
Okay. So I'd already completed my first year at the academy, which for any cadet is hell. I'm just going to say it, because you get hazed. You're just constantly yelled at and criticized and picked on. And they do that. Even fraternities do that. They haze the newbies, right? And they really break down your self-esteem, because they want to build you back up as a unit. But it really is cruel. It really is abusive. And I survived that. I survived Hell Week. I don't know how, by the grace of God. The summer program, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. I was in the Rocky Mountains and I managed to survive all of that training. And coming into August of the new year, our squadron had an event. There's 40 squadrons at the academy, and ours was having like a kickoff celebration of the new year. I was now a third degree. And typically you're excited because then you can dump on the freshmen, and get back at them for how you were treated, so you feel like you have some power now. But I had just finished a summer course there. So I was already at the academy. You only get 3 weeks off during the summer. So you're doing summer programs otherwise. And right before, I had gone to the Commandant of Cadets on that Sunday, had invited me and 2 other cadets to come speak to new recruits, new high schoolers, about coming to the Air Force Academy and what it would be like for them, especially women coming in. So I went and did that little dog and pony show with the second in charge of the whole academy. And then I went out to the event, and it was a softball beer ball game, and I got there late. And so I was one of the last to leave, and I rode home. Since we're not allowed to have cars there till we're juniors and seniors, I asked a senior that I didn't know hardly at all for a ride back to the academy. And little did I know, he had been drinking most of the day and wanted to stop at a bar on the way back, even though we had a curfew of 7:35. And I'm thinking, as a 19-year-old who never dated, my dad was real strict about that. Oh, this will be kind of fun. I'm in a Corvette convertible and we'll stop at a bar, each have a beer or two. And then I never made it back to the academy. And what later turned out had happened was when my memory came back, he made a sexual advance as we were going back, and I said no, and he got mad at me and turned the wheel of the Corvette, and it spun out and hit a huge boulder, flipped over. I went through the windshield, pronounced dead at the scene. Some people in a nearby house saw it, called 911, and had come to check on me and had brought some blankets and covered me up because they could get no vitals. So when the fire department got there, this particular EMT, John, he always checks the victims himself. He turned over the blankets, and the only sign of life he could get from me was my right pupil dilated. There was a flicker in my eye. So he knew there was some kind of life in me and just hoped he could save me. So I got to the hospital. They were doing CPR the whole way. My blood pressure was 60/0. They didn't think I was going to make it. And it was a long night for all the doctors. And I made it through. And then I spent the next 7 weeks in ICU, going up and down, 6 major operations, another code blue where I didn't make it through the surgery. They called, my parents were praying in the hospital, and they went and told them that I had died. They had called the time on me and everything. And here my heart comes back again, So I tried a couple more times to leave this planet, and I just kept coming back. So,
all this in the hospital.
Yeah. So I know that I'm here for a reason. And, I had multiple injuries. I had amputation of my left foot. They grafted that together. It only had a 5% chance of taking, and it did. I broke my pelvis on both sides. I basically went butt up through the windshield is how I later remembered it. So I cut up all the insides of my legs, had to have skin grafts, severed my right wrist, road burn on my cheek where you skid along the pavement. So they had to do some surgery there. But it's, they put me back together pretty good, but it was just, I had a lot of infections set in, sepsis from all the debris and the feces and all that, just, gangrene set in. I didn't even know that until later, that my leg was almost amputated from it. So a lot of near death, just every day. What I now realize is I was terrified. I was terrified I was going to die again, and I didn't want to, because when I woke up in the hospital, which was about 12 hours later, that would have been Monday morning, I was just horrified where I was. And the first thing I said is, don't tell my dad, he'll kill me, because I broke his rules. And sure enough, later, when I was a little bit stronger, he basically told me I was partly to blame for the wreck because I broke his rules. He thought I was dating the guy. I was drinking, have a cigarette. And I'm just like, what is college for? That's part of, rebelling and growing up and all of that, but not in my father's world. So he therefore extrapolated that I disobeyed God and deserved what I got. So I had this heap of shame, disappointment of my parents, and now I was not going to go back and graduate from the academy, which I was relieved because I didn't really want to be there. I was there for him, and I knew that during basic training. I just knew it when I'm being taught how to kill people. My soul was like, oh my God, are we in the wrong business here?
So wow, amazing. And thank you for sharing. So how about how long were you in the hospital total?
4 months.
4 months in the hospital. Okay.
And then 8 months in physical therapy. So I had to learn how to walk again. And it was a long haul. And
then that's tremendous.
And then I didn't get the mental or the spiritual guidance that I needed. My parents, the doctor said, Nicole's going to need to see a psychiatrist, a mental health. And mom said, no, Jesus and God are our psychiatrist. She'll be fine. And I wasn't. And that's when I developed an eating disorder.
Okay.
As a result of that pain.
And this was post, obviously, after you got out of the hospital.
Yeah.
There was just a sense of, I imagine, just a lot of fear, a lot of unprocessed emotion.
Oh, for sure. Trauma. It's just pure trauma. Yeah. PTSD. Trauma. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, number one, from just, the entire, saying no to a sexual advance where there's an abusive response. Just, it's a lot. It's a lot for any one person to go through in this life. And yet you did. I'm happy. I'm glad that you're here, that you survived this and have healed and been through so much healing work. And I guess the question would be, let's get into a little bit about what, and I know it took some time for this probably to come back to your conscious awareness, but what did you experience at death? Did you start to experience this NDE from the moment of the accident, or was it when you were in the hospital and coded, in surgery? When did it, as far as you're aware of, when did this out of body experience begin for you?
When I slammed against the rock, I went up and I kind of froze there. And when I looked down, I could see that I knew I was going to die. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. And I didn't. So as soon as I hit the ground, this male angel came down and lifted me up.
So you were witnessing the accident, like you were already out of the body, and you could see the accident happen. You could see yourself flying through the windshield. I could see the
end result of the accident. I saw the car turned over. Gotcha. I saw me in the ditch is where I wound up. I saw, I know what I was wearing, my khaki shorts, my Azad t-shirt, I saw my body.
Kind of like you skipped ahead in time a little bit.
Yes, exactly.
Totally. Okay.
Okay. So I saw all that and just went, oh my gosh, and didn't feel any pain. Okay. No pain. And to this day, I have no remembrance of any pain of any of that part. My pain starts being remembered as soon as I woke up in the hospital. So this angel took me in an upward position, and I could see down there, and I was just like, oh boy, poor girl, and the level that I was at, it was a different plane. Let's just call it that. Okay. Of a being. It wasn't like I was 25,000 feet in the air or whatever. All I know is I was lifted up and on a different plane. And what I remembered was there were other beings talking to themselves. They were like what they were saying. You could hear, you couldn't see the form, but you knew it. And they were saying that we needed, meaning people here on earth need to ask the angels, spirit guides, those on the spiritual realm, the angelic realm, for help. When we get in a situation and we need help, we need to ask for that. They're not going to come in and intervene unless they have our permission or our request for that, unless it's life or death, which was in my case. So that was a message I want people to know, is you have to ask for help.
Being vulnerable, opening up your heart to ask when you're in a tough situation.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Amazing. Okay. Describe the angel, so to speak. So you talked about this angel was kind of lifted you up. What's your recollection of that being?
I just remember it was male, and I remembered it was just huge. It just like enveloped me. And I was in this cocoon of bliss, and you can't even really describe it. And I felt so safe. And so there was no pain. I wasn't Nicole. I was just this, just joy, bliss, peace. And, I don't know, just felt so comforted and safe and beautiful and loved and serene. The words don't really even describe it. And I've since processed it at a level where I now know it was my grandfather, who died when he was actually my age now, 58 years old. And he is the one that came down and helped me. And I was just like, oh, wow. And I didn't want to come back. And he told me that my message, I was going to go back, and that my message was to tell people to not be afraid of death. And I was just like, whoa, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go back in that body, because I could see there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering once I got back in it. And going back into my family of origin and how strict they were. Now I was going to be an infant again. I can't do anything on my own. And I've got these two parents who I've got to depend on. So instead of at 19 separating and growing up into my own identity, I'm going back into infancy. But, I believe in my soul that I rewrote my contract of why I came into the world. And it took on a whole new meaning when I came back of, this is your message, and you will, my angels have continued to work hard to keep me alive and functioning to get this message out. And I think one of my, after my name on the book, I put one of my credentials as BTDT, and people go, what is that? And I go, it's been there, done that. And I said, to me, out of all the letters of the alphabet, that is the most important credential that you can have, because you can't beat a state of experience. If you've been an addict and recovered. That's true.
That's true education, right? Like
yes,
that's your credential. It's like been there, done that. That's the only things we really know are what we have experienced.
That's right.
Yeah, totally.
And the only thing I ever remembered from the very beginning was white, bright light. And it wasn't a blinding light where you can't look into it or need sunglasses. It was just pure white light. And when I was on the other side, the other thing that really struck me was there were other colors. It's that they're not in the 64 color Crayola box. There's colors we haven't even imagined or seen. And what does white represent in the color world?
It's all the colors put together, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And the spectrum. So you saw that you had this experience with this angel lifted you. Were you, I guess here's a question I have is like, when you were on this other side, this other plane, you're having this awareness, right? You're overhearing conversations from other beings that are saying, yes, look, the people need to ask for help on the earth. And you're picking up on that. Like, we exist. Important. And there is a whole other plane of existence where there's beings, they live, and these folks need to ask for help. So you're getting that. You're also experiencing bliss and love. You have an identity that goes beyond just Nicole, right? So what does it mean to be Nicole, right? So there's a whole story in that, but you're existing beyond that story. Your true essence is beyond that. Did you have a conscious awareness that you had this human experience, that you were Nicole, that you had left the body? Were you aware that this was what we call death and that your life is still existing beyond the body? Was that in your awareness, or did you forget your life here?
No, it was in my awareness, but it was more in my awareness the moment the accident happened. Like, I realized I was shouting out, oh my God, I'm not, help me. And I knew I wasn't going to make it. I just knew it. I knew I was going to die. And I did, so they estimated I was dead between 10 to 15 minutes. So before John got there.
But you did not cease to exist.
No, I did not. And that is why your soul is eternal. Your spirit and your soul are eternal. It is like when you die, that breath that keeps us alive, the breath escapes and just moves in an upward direction. It's like a balloon, a big heart balloon that just has a string on it, and boop, it gets cut and it leaves and it floats straight up.
How long? And again, I know that question, how long, because time is probably very different in that dimension. What did you see? A lot of things. Were a lot of things being communicated to you? How quick or long did this seem to you?
It seemed like an instant. but I know it had to be longer because they did get the first responders there for 10 to 15 minutes. So you're right. Time doesn't exist there like it is here on Earth. And so I honestly have no idea. It was so fast.
So this light that you talk about seeing, did it communicate to you? Did this light, was there any form of, what was that?
No, it was just comforting. It was like being in a cocoon or like an astronaut floating in space. It was just when you're weightless and you have absolutely there's nothing to fear anymore. There's nothing to you're responsible for. I mean, it was just total freedom, total bliss. And I know a lot of people with NDEs, they go really into these elaborate situations where they see this person or that person and all that. And I think mine was deliberately kept simple so that I could really focus on this message. And for that, I'm grateful, because I think you can get caught up in all of these different books, that are telling you it's butterflies and unicorns and that you do this and that and the other. And what I've done is taken the top 10 common lessons from near-death experiences, which was published in 2020, the annual report for the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And each one of them is a chapter in my book. So the first one, and this is lots of research, is we do not die. Okay. So our soul and spirit do not die. They have a long life. Okay. So that's the first one. And the second one is love is all that matters. And it's the source of all that exists, and look at the situation that we're in now regarding love versus hate. The third one is, everyone and everything is connected. Those 10 lessons are all positive. And I want people to really start challenging themselves and to awaken and start discussing what is their fear of death. And in my book, I do put a checklist at the end for those people, especially if you're in a book club. And I will tell you, if you're in a book club and you use my book, I will zoom in for 30 minutes and talk with you guys about things. But it's really important that you confront, what is your fear with death? Are you scared of leaving your family? Are you scared of not leaving a legacy? What are some of your fears, and to really confront that. And then that's going to lead you, if you have a belief in God, to what is your belief in God? Do you really believe that God is going to be punishing and judgmental? Because I can tell you what I experienced of that realm is God is energy. There's nowhere God is not. There's no one religion that has a market on God. We are all eternal sparks of God. God is not external. I was raised, he's external. You have to pray to him. God is in you and in me. And that's that namaste, the light of God in you. So that is a message that has grossly kept people in fear and keeps you from being who you are meant to be when you are living in that fear, that
Sure.
You've got these rules. And if you're somehow not doing them, then you're going to go to a place called hell that's separate and never see anybody. And that'll scare the wee out of you, and then you deal with a lot of shame about that, and a lot of guilt.
It's true. I mean, it's a play on the ultimate human fear. It really, exacerbates the survival, this primal survival essence that we have. And when, it creates trauma, and it keeps us in perpetual, what I would call fight or flight our whole life.
Yes. That little amygdala is just staying on alert, and you have got to get that calmed down so that you can use your prefrontal cortex to make executive decisions. But when you are constantly getting triggered in present day situations that are going back in time to situations that you never resolved, then you're going to live in that loop your entire life.
Totally. So good. So well said. So the message that was communicated to you, from this angelic being was, hey, there is no death, or death doesn't need to be feared. And this is your message. You need to go back and tell people this.
Yeah.
Now, when you obviously were resuscitated or back in the body, you're in the hospital for 4 months, you get out of the hospital, life is, I would imagine, very challenging, right? So, so this is when did fear come back into your realm of? Oh,
absolutely. Because we're human, we have to balance between these two states of being human and being spiritual. And, it's, we exist in a much greater narrative, an expanding consciousness, growing love and compassion. And I think what I realized when I, came back and was in the hospital, I went right back into fear because I was in crisis of life and death all the time. And I didn't want to die again because I couldn't remember what had happened on the other side. So I was stuck back into my 19-year-old belief system that God was punishing me for disobeying my dad. And boy, am I reaping a harsh punishment, And that's what has taken me such a long time to process and let go of. And, you really have to look at these belief systems that you have been handed down, whether they're generational, ancestral, some even past lives. And why are you still believing them? Because they're not serving you anymore. And one of them that a lot of women get stuck in, and men too, is people pleasing, and at the end of the day, you feel like you're a little roach that got stomped on because what did it bring you? So you've got to start letting go these death to these ascribed identities and figure out who you are, and not, someone who is in this role of mother or wife. I mean, those are identities, but who are you at the core? And that is this soul. So I'm hoping that, and I don't want people to misunderstand me. There is still suffering. There's still grief and pain and loss that we must carefully and compassionately hold and heal when someone does die or passes over. But I want them to remember that the moment that person takes their last breath, that they are free, they're not in pain, they're not alone, they are at peace.
Beautiful. I love that. Is in your understanding, do you feel that communication with people who have passed over is possible? So like, let's say, you have a loved one who's passed. Do you communicate with them? In your understanding, is that communication something that goes on?
Yes.
Post-death?
Absolutely. And we all have that capability. It's our intuitiveness and our ability. It's a muscle. You have to hone it, and you have to believe it's possible as well. You have to suspend your disbelief about it, because on the other side of the veil is a whole different world. I mean, for us to think we're the only beings in this universe, that is just ridiculous. We are not. I'm here to tell you, we are not. There's other interplanetary beings that have life. And I think, we choose to come in to help lift up the consciousness, the awareness. We're here at this time during a critical time on Earth's spectrum about changing the way we treat people, the way we treat animals, and the way we treat Mother Earth. And you can see from the hurricane, Mother Nature is always going to win out. You can have the high-tech equipment that predicts it's going this way, but she's going to figure out, no, I'm going this way, and I think people need to start taking this time to become more aware of their own way of treating Earth, and these corporations that are just, ravaging Earth. And we've got to do something about it. And we've got to pull back and respect Mother Earth, respect one another, and treat each other equally and humanely. And the same with our animals.
And I like to tell people in my coaching work that it's a mantra we learn, and it's a meditation we go through, but it's really, we're not the body and we're also not the mind.
Yes.
So what makes us who we are is we have a body and we have a mind. So we have a form, but it's not who we are. Just like I have a car, right? It's not me. The car is not me. But I have a car. I use it to
right.
To get from place to place and that kind of thing. We have a body to give us expression, but it's not who we are. And that's ultimately what the spiritual process is, right? So realizing, because that word has a lot of baggage. When we say spiritual, we just mean beyond the physical. And when we understand that life is life, regardless of its form.
Yes. And that we're all these beautiful light beings, that our souls came in that way, and that we are here to ultimately leave the earth, leave people in a higher state than when we came in. And I think that's where we're in this the next couple of years are going to be a kind of turmoil as we start navigating our way into more consciousness of, I'm not going to be treated this way anymore. I'm not going to allow these people to have that kind of power over my life. I'm going to empower myself. I don't need to seek externally what I know I have internally.
Mm-hmm. No, that's beautiful. How would you say your near-death experience has shaped your career and also your relationships?
Oh, anybody that has an NDE, it cannot not change them. First of all, I am more sensitive to things. I can't drink alcohol without getting any kind of migraine. I can't handle any kind of smoke, cigarette smoke, fire, all of that. It just absolutely makes me sick. I can't handle loud noise, which is really hard because my husband's a musician. So we had to create a whole studio for him in the garage, and the band can play out there, but I just can't handle that. I can't handle crowds of people. I'm more sensitive to energy, and being able to read people's energy and going, oh, I need to stay away from that person, or needing to take care of myself and putting, boundaries around myself. But I've gotten into more of energy medicine and understanding that just how to protect myself more in terms of that from other people's energy and not taking on their energy, like if they're depressed, not trying to fix them. So I feel better for saving them, but also in the same thing, I'm taking on that depression as well. It's changed me in terms of my career because, of course, coming out of this, I went into the health and wellness field, and I went to CDC, got a public health degree, got a nutrition degree. The nutrition degree was to fix my eating disorder. Little did I know that it had to do with my mind and the psychology of that. I just thought it was what I could eat. So I went to help other people that were dealing with compulsive eating, and it's now known as bulimia, but back then they didn't have that name for it. I started out with the physical. When you look at the wellness wheel and you divide it into quarters, there's the physical, which we spend about 80% of our time in. We're trying to eat healthy and, get the amount of sleep and physical activity and all of those physical things. And then the other quarter is the mental, and dealing with stress. And I would say over 95% of admissions into the ER are stress related. So we are a stressed out society. We are having a lot of anxiety. We're having a lot of depression. We have a lot of PTSD. We have a lot of dysregulation going on and trauma. And that's causing this. And then I moved into the emotional. I got into neuro-emotional technique to address emotions because we're a very illiterate society when it comes to your emotions. Most of us were taught 4: mad, bad, sad, glad. And that's what got us through. We didn't realize there's this whole buffet of betrayal and, low self-esteem and all this kind of stuff coming in. So most of us also get cut off from our body and only filter the emotion through our head intellectually. Oh yeah, I should be angry at him because, he did this to me, so I'm angry, but it doesn't get in your body. And that's that whole piece that you're seeing now coming up with wellness, is embodying feelings and emotions. So that's what I did for 7 years. I went and got certified, helped people with that. I still use it today on myself when I'm stuck, having written this book. I'll have to tell you this, Jamal. I got my first, I've had 5 stars, which I don't want to get caught up in all that, but it's like everybody's been so positive. I woke up this morning and somebody wrote a 1 star and I was just like crushed. And then I read it and I just went, oh my gosh, this is totally about them not processing their own stuff. And they're throwing it at me and saying my book didn't fix them or whatever, and took me a while to get through it, but I still have to do this work myself, I'm human. And it was just like, wow. And it was a physician, saying, you didn't have an NDE. And I'm like, what? You're telling me I didn't have, you don't even know me. So it's dealing, and I'm sure you understand that too, when somebody says, no, you didn't help me or whatever, and you're going, wow, that's news to me. So anyway, I think, now that I've gone into the spiritual quadrant of realigning who I am and getting my body, mind, soul, and spirit together, not that they're all in alignment all the time because I am human, but to really work on the piece that now, 40 years later, I was meant to come in to tell people, is that death really, you do not need to fear it because you are deathless. And it's a beautiful message. And I hope we can change our culture from this doom and gloom about death and being in death denial to more of a positive of when you pass, that you're just going into this beautiful space and that you're okay. And you can ask your whoever passed to send you a sign that they're okay. You've got to be open to different ways it comes in. A lot of people can hear something. A lot of people can, a song on the radio may come on and you go, oh my gosh, that was our song. Or, you may see lights flickering, the electrical stuff going off and on. And, but they hear you and they see you, and they don't want you to be in suffering and pain because they're no longer there. They will always be there in spirit and soul, and you can always, ask.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you being so generous and being on the show and sharing your story with us. What is and I like to ask this question as we wrap up here on the podcast. One of the questions I like to ask is, for somebody who's listened to this conversation, what is the one thing you would like to say, look, if you didn't hear anything else, hear this. What's the one thing you want them to take away or walk away from this conversation with?
Do not fear death. Do not be afraid of it. And love yourself first. Really work on self-love and what that truly means, and take off the conditions of love you may have been raised with. And you have to start with yourself. But that other side is unconditional love. And I find most of us don't get it here. So unconditionally love yourself. Anytime you start beating up yourself and using the word should, say F off, but those are the 2 things that I would say.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Nicole, thank you so much for your time and for sharing. I
really enjoyed it. And I hope your listeners get some benefit out of it. And you can go to my website at www.nicolekerr.com. I'll send you the first chapter of the book for free. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It'll be in Target, but it's a great Christmas gift. They just put it on sale. So,
tell us the name of your book again.
It's called You Are Deathless. A near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death.
Beautiful. You Are Deathless by Nicole Kerr on Amazon.
Yeah.
Awesome. Beautiful. And all that information is on your website. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
And your website is Nicole
Kerr.com.
Nicole, simple enough. Nicole Kerr, KERR.com. Awesome.
Yep. And my email is Nicole@NicoleKerr.com. So you can email me if you have a question.
Totally. Thank you. Well, thank you for, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you made it. And I also am glad that you are fulfilling your purpose and your mission here to tell the story. And that's why we're here today.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Until next time, take care, guys. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.